anyways, folks, this is Jason Podollan, and Jason was he played from Vernon. It's a beautiful city, by the way, Vernon, British Columbia, and he played youth hockey out there and was drafted. I don't know what round you were drafted in junior too, but you were drafted as Spokane Chiefs. Played for the likes of Mike Babcock, I believe, for at least a year or two.
Yep.
And then he was drafted. Obviously, not knowing your life, like the first time we've really talked, but obviously you're a very good hockey player and you did a little bit of everything. Got drafted 31st overall to the Florida Panthers, and spent his NHL or his pro career with is it 3 different teams? So you got
Well, 4 different NHL teams I played games for, and there was one team that I was under contract with and never played for. So five different teams.
Okay, overall. So awesome. So you're, and then a 31st overall pick, which today's day you'd be the first round, and then also played for the Canadian national junior team in '96, which I believe you won a gold medal with them.
We did, yeah, the 4th in a row at the time.
Oh, that's amazing. And then finished your playing career overseas, and I believe it was Germany.
Yeah, well, there was one little more hiatus. So I did retire from Germany. Thought higher education was where I was supposed to be. And in that adventure, I was getting phone calls from all over the place. And one of the ones that I finally agreed to was a stop in Asia in the Asia League. So played for a team in Japan for 2 months or 3 months, and that was my last paying job. After that, I kind of got the bug again, and I had a tryout with the Detroit Red Wings and played an exhibition game with them the next fall. Gave it one more kick at the cat, and anyways, hurt myself in camp, and the rest of that is history. But yeah, there was one other little stop there afterwards.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't get all the background, but I did. Now that you say it, I heard you talk about that on one of your podcasts for sure. So awesome. So it's great. It's a great journey, and what I like about this is where I think we're going to take this is I definitely want to talk about Up My Hockey, which you own now, and which is there's a podcast, there's player development. I'm sure there's parent development in that as well. Yeah. And then you have the mindset that you work with players, which I'm very, very intrigued with. And then, of course, I want to touch on your UP Up My Hockey 68.
Right. Yeah. So, awesome.
Yeah. And the one thing that I think we have in common, and I think maybe I want to start with that, is I love the story because most people that get drafted very, very high and have a very successful junior career, getting drafted 31st overall, it's almost like, okay, it's a given. It's just a matter of time before I'm in the NHL, and that's my career. And as you learned and this is obviously not a put down. It's just a reality. It's very, very, very hard to be an NHL hockey player, and for various different reasons. Mm-hmm. So you've got your youth, you've got your pro career, you've got your junior career, you've got the World Juniors, all these things that are saying I'm going to be a great player, and which you were, and then as you retire, you get into kind of the business that I'm in. And the great thing that I love is you have kids that are in the game as well.
Yeah.
And recently, I think it was the past draft. Your son, is it Hudson or
Hudson? Yeah, my oldest is Hudson. Yeah.
Hudson was drafted to Calgary.
Kamloops Blazers.
Kamloops Blazers. I'm sorry. And so, like, talk about that process as a dad going into watching your kids, because I absolutely loved it, and I actually didn't have the issues that other parents had because kind of saw it. But tell me about that. How great that is.
Well, I mean, that's really what brought me back. You mean going back a little bit farther in our discussion here already? You said, was there ever a part where you weren't around hockey? And there was, like, probably 10. When I retired, I couldn't have left the game fast enough, to be honest. Like I had a little bit of that. The experience there where I wanted to come back when I was leaving Asia and like, yeah, I think I can play in the NHL still. I was 30 years old, right? I'm like, I want to revisit this opportunity again. Like it didn't go well with as far as injury was concerned at camp, and I didn't want to play in the minors again, even though that opportunity was there. So I was like, all right, I'm done. And then so I jumped into the corporate world and do other things and kind of just left hockey as, I mean, honestly, and I've said this before, almost as like a regret in some ways when I first left, like a way of like, I should have been something else. It should have been better than it was. Right. So it was, a little bit of that. I was like, okay, you mean great experience, everything else, but it wasn't what I thought it should have been, for whatever reasons, and then just moved on. And then with the kids though happening, we tried to be a ski family. Like my wife had nothing to do with hockey at all in any way, shape, or form, and she wanted to hit the ski hills in the winter, and I had no dog in that fight, and so we gave that a whirl. But they just wanted nothing to do with it. Like they wanted to be on the pond, and they wanted to be
Yeah.
skating, and they wanted to be doing this and doing that. So they brought me back to it. I mean, so now they're playing, right? They're young players. They're playing. Obviously, who's going to coach? Well, I should, right? Because why shouldn't
Yep.
I? And yeah, so I got involved in the game that way, and for me, that was really my rebirth to like my love affair with the sport, because you get a little jaded as a pro. You can, at least, and especially when things don't maybe go your way as you perceive them, and things
Hmm.
happen, you can lose perspective, and coming back at the grassroots level there with my boys was really a revitalization for me of like all the great things the game can be and what it is about and what it stands for and what you can teach through it, and all these amazing things. And then obviously now I'm able to bring my perspective and my personal experience to be able to say to these guys, because now I can say it unboastfully, right? Like I was a really, really good hockey player as a young player, like,
Obviously.
and and I was supposed to be the guy, you know what I mean? And the guys that I'm working with now, like they weren't, like very few are like that, right? So it's like if you think you're gonna make it, like there's things you got to do, right, for this to happen. So it's fun to have that perspective, and really, it's a full circle thing, because if I was a guy that played 500 games in the NHL or 1,000 or whatever, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now,
Right.
right? I'd be doing something else. There'd be no reason to be giving back, right? Because you'd be
Yep.
invested in doing other things. So the fact that I'm able to use that now, as a benefit for somebody else, is actually a really rewarding thing. So I guess that's a really long-winded answer to your question about the boys. To see your boy's name be called at the WHL draft is super cool, against the nemesis that I battled against forever. Wasn't quite as cool. I was hoping it was going to be the Spokane Chiefs, but
Yep.
the fact that he got it, that elation that I saw in him, all the work that he's put in to have that happen. And obviously, there's hours and hours and hours of work left, but just being a part of it for sure, from the perspective of a parent is probably even more rewarding in some ways. Than doing it yourself. I actually just made a video about Josh Doan, who I just interviewed on the podcast, and
I
his first
listen. I
NHL
listened to it.
goal.
Listened to it the other
Oh,
day.
cool. Yeah.
Yep.
And so like I played that clip, and I'm sure you've seen it, like where he scores and Shane is like you can't even describe elation other than looking at him, right? And it's like, how many goals did he score? How long did he play? And like he probably never had a reaction to his own goal like he did for his son, seeing him get to that spot, right? So like to be that now in that chair, it's like it's really fun to watch your kids go through it for sure.
Yeah, it was that was the same I did with Charlie. I had two older kids, but they weren't like dedicated. One was a girl, good in volleyball, track, but never really got into the sports the way that we did. But it was funny because in 2000 I started my business, and Charlie was born in 2005. So he grew up in the dressing room, and he grew up on the ice, and he knows so many NHL players that skated with me. And he used to come on the ice. Like I remember uh, Steve Ott and Mike Weber and Ekblad and stuff would say, hey, let Charlie come on. He was just like 7 or 8, 9 years old. And it was great, but he didn't know any different, right?
Yeah.
But when before that even happened, it was I would take a couple of days a week in the mornings, and I would just take him off just to hang out with him because I work. This business, it's later in the day, so you don't get to see your kids quite as much. So on the days off, because I didn't want to push hockey on him at all, it was around him, and it would be my wife told him that there's ice at the rink down the road.
Yeah.
So he was a little guy. He goes, "Daddy, can we go skating?" And I go, I found everything that I found every reason not to take him. I'd say, "Oh, well, the leaves are outside. Let's go play in the leaves." And he goes, "Can we go skating?" So that's how he came, and it was a never a push. And
Yeah.
to your point, um, it was great to see that he had the drive. Not even I don't even want to call it drive when you're 7, but he loved the game of hockey kind of the way I did. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool to see, and watch him playing as a 7-year old, and not having a clue how to play, but carrying the puck around the ice, like not to the net, but just thinking that was a cool thing to do, and just watch him evolve and come out with a smile on his face. It made me so happy. And then to your point, to see him get drafted, like the hard work that went into it without me, and a lot of people say, a lot of people I talk to say I never push my kid, but they do. because they got the thing on there. Did you do your 200 shots today? Did you do this? And it's like it's got to be intrinsic, right? It doesn't have to be, but it should be.
Yeah.
And to watch him do the work, and like you said, it's the hours of the ups and the downs, and I don't know from your perspective, but I know mine because I have a really successful business, and there's pictures of where I played and stuff, and people walk in and they go, oh, okay, so you have an advantage because your dad is this and you're breaking doors open. It's not true. It's just the kid did the work. So there's
Right.
that little bit of adversity, and just I was very proud of him for going through like the hard times. The good times are great. That's great because that's the easy part. But I love seeing when things aren't going your way, or when maybe a coach is a little bit jealous. And I don't know if you've ever um, experienced that with your boys. That the kids, your son's got to battle that aspect, and it's like a battle. There's a battle all the time, and that's one of the things that I'm the most proud of him is that he when things are tough, he chooses to continue on and work.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a massive attribute, as you know, and I mean, it's not almost, it's a requirement, it sounds like what your boy wants to do there. And,
yeah,
he's playing in these NHL prospect games and he wants to
yeah,
be a pro player. Uh, it's not smooth for anybody, and there's going to be some adversity there, which is where like the storyline of my business comes from, right? Is like, if you haven't experienced adversity, and that's the thing that I really do find in today's player, is that there's like adversity is almost manufactured out of the game, with the no real tryouts. Even if it was at that WHL camp, it wasn't really a tryout. There wasn't really competitive spots unless you were a young guy, right? Everything else was spoken for, which was not the case when you and I were doing it. So you mean, like, so the adversity of that even is not there. I mean, you're guaranteed these positions and what you're supposed to do, and from the time you're 8. So it's like at some point that does change. It depends on what organization you get drafted
yeah,
to, or whatever. And a lot of players aren't equipped for it now, and so to your point, like, if your boy did have the I call it the opportunity of a challenge, awesome. And if he came out of it finding that he found some resolve within himself, or some resilience, or something about him as a human that's going to allow him to be an amazing hockey player, that's worth its weight in gold. No
yeah,
question about it.
yeah, 100%. I wanted to ask you about going to Hudson's first camp. So interesting enough, like, and I wanted to maybe we'll stick on this a little bit. So a lot of the people that we assume in our area in Ontario, we have it's a lot different than it is out east and out west. So number one, like in the WHL draft, you have that early draft. So meaning for people that don't really understand this right now is um, here it's your 16-year-old year. Out west it's 15 or 14. Major
Yeah,
bantam,
even
right?
opposite, right? I'd say your draft is like after your 15-year-old year, so
Yeah,
you can get drafted and then play as a 16-year-old. Here we have it during their 14-year-old
yeah,
year. So they're drafted and they can't play in the WHL for a full another season yet.
yeah. So which is amazing to me because um, a 14 that's got to be tough to judge to scout a 14-year-old playing in the OA or the WHL, and I don't even know how you project that because I've seen, obviously you have too, you've seen so many changes in the best player from a year to or two, and someone that's a late developer or someone that just I mean it just takes time, and I just find 14 so young. There's so many changes.
Yeah, I mean, I would not want to be a WHL scout. I think it's tough. It's tough enough. I mean, they try to project, right, 14 to really 18, 19, right? That's what they're looking at their team for. Like, what's this
Yeah,
player going to be like in
yeah,
essentially 5 years? Some of these kids haven't even gone through puberty yet, right? Like,
right.
how the heck are you supposed to know when you're waiting for growth spurts? You're waiting for this, waiting for that. So there's been a lot of discussion about that. I mean, I think the NCAA and the actually the BC Junior League was a big draw here. So there's a little bit more competition. So I think that happened, well before our time, kind of, right, of when those things were put into place. But why it was beneficial, and then it was really hard to change. I mean, I thought they were going to change it with during COVID when they lost the draft. I was like, well, what a
Yeah,
perfect time to bring it back, right,
yeah,
to 15. But no, they never did. They decided collectively that it was best for the league to not, and and so they're stuck doing major bantams, which again, I think it just separates for out here. It just separates the path a lot quicker for players, because a lot of
yeah,
these guys that maybe wanted to go WHL that don't hear their name called, they now automatically gravitate to the AJHL or the BCHL, and they think that they're going to be a college guy, right? Because not that it doesn't happen, because there's probably about 20-25% of the league is undrafted players.
Mhm.
At 14, it is hard to jump, right? You got to jump a lot of spots to end up to be able to play, right? So I mean, that's the reality of it. So I mean, really, it's a bit unfortunate in some contexts, but whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah. So essentially, like, so you feel like that's the reason that the draft is at 14, because the BCHL and the AJ are taking them a little bit earlier, and it's more of geared for kids that want to play college. So you feel like the draft is that year early to get them in their system early, more or less,
Well,
right?
yeah, you have the ability to
Okay.
market them, right?
Okay.
Essentially,
Okay. That,
and BCHL, I don't know what the rules are like now that they've gone rogue, but like they couldn't actually talk to the same players at the same age, right? So
right.
now like the only window for them was the WHL, and so WHL could feed their Kool-Aid to them, and get them on board, and the parents and everything else get excited about it. And I mean, in essence, I mean, it is, I mean, honestly, a superior league, right? Like, as
Yeah.
far as that's concerned. So the draw is there, and you get these kids wanting to go, and then yeah, you kind of got your hooks in them a little bit, right?
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense then. Um, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense, but still, it's young to be taking kids at 14, man. There's got to be a lot of mistakes being made.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, look at the WH. I mean, the NHL draft's no different, right? And it has to be worse. I mean, at the pre-puberty level for a lot of these guys, right? I mean, it's for sure is worse. That's the one thing that kind of breaks my heart, is for the guys that are smaller, late developers, that you call them, whether it's a late developer skill or just from a physical standpoint. Is like, you just got to stick around, and sometimes you can't stick around, right? So then you are
Yeah.
legitimately in the wrong league, right? And it's hard to
Yeah.
get out of the wrong league or the
Yeah.
wrong leagues. But
Yeah.
if you can just keep up your late birthday, whatever, like, stay in there, I find that those players often end up to be the best players, because they've had to
Yeah.
figure out their way around the ice when they weren't physically overpowering. And I know you've
Yeah.
seen that before, where some of these physically superior players, when the physicality catches up and everyone's as big and strong as them, they don't know how to play the game anymore.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe we could touch on that a little bit. Is that's one of the things I don't get too excited about a player too early. Like, so my son was a late birthday too. He's a December birthday,
Right.
so he was drafted. And I'm looking at him going to Guelph that year, and I'm like, you're just a kid. He was 6 feet tall, but like just a baby, and he jumped in that league, and I'm like, it's a huge jump. And as a dad, I'm like, I wasn't the biggest guy. I'm like just under 5'10", and I knew the game was a little different back then. But to watch him go into there, and his first, it was the COVID year, after the COVID year, so they played Kitchener, I think, 12 times, and he's a right winger going on Arbor Jackeye every game. And Arbor Jackeye was an overage. It was like, that's your first taste of hockey, son. And but that was the point. Is like, he was willing to do it, and he was willing to do it every day, and face the fear. And like, that's what I told him. I said, you might not be the best right now, but if you're continuing to do that for 4 years, what a player you're going to be,
Yeah.
right? And these kids that's my biggest talk that I have with parents and kids that are early bloomers is, I always say, I said, just not to be an ass, but don't get too excited too soon. So, because you got to remember, you got hair on your body, you got hair on your face, you're bigger than everybody. The game is actually easy. It's easier. So when everything catches up and you get that kid that hits puberty a little bit later, and he's willing to battle, and he maybe catches up in size and strength, that's good. But he's also got determination and the will to fight, not physically fight necessarily, but he doesn't realize that he's 6'2" anymore. He still plays like he's 5'6", and that's a dangerous player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they learn to move pucks. I mean, that's the other
Yep.
thing. I mean,
Yep.
like, you have to play the game differently, and really, in a game, it has to be a more evolved game at a younger level, right? Because some of
Yeah.
these guys can just do the Sportsnet, highlight reel and just go end to end. I mean, that obviously ends at some point too, right? And if you don't know how to move pucks and get them back, or what open ice looks like, because you never
Yeah.
had to find it, that's a detriment, because it's hard to learn that in junior at 18 years old. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, 100%. Something about youth hockey out west. So in Ontario, as I was kind of saying before, I go on tangents all over the place. What we have here is, like, there's if you're not playing AAA and you're a pretty good player, I'm not saying that there's no chance, but it's like, if you're a pretty good player, you're probably playing AAA or AA. You're not traveling, like, here, even in Windsor. We're at the south end, the southernmost part of Ontario, next to Detroit, and like we don't have to travel far really. Like Toronto's only 3 hours, Ottawa's only like seven. So like playing AAA hockey is not a hard thing to do. Whereas you get out west, what I noticed is that there's a lot of academies and all these things like that, and maybe AAA hockey is like it might be a real grinder. Maybe it's almost non-existent. What? So that was when I was looking at all the academies and stuff. I said, like, why do they do it like that out there? And I just didn't have a really good understanding of how it works out west. So can you like do your best? It's kind of to educate our people that listen to us out west or in remote areas in the U.S. even or out east. What's your take on that? Like, if you're not playing if you don't live in Vancouver, playing in the Vancouver system or something like that, like, is that kind of why the academies are taking off so much? And is it? I don't want to say is it necessary, or maybe that is the question. I'm not really sure. Um,
Um,
just go ahead and talk about it in any way you want.
yeah, no, we can have a discussion about it. Obviously, for me, it would just be completely personal theory, and
Hmm.
like my two oldest boys are both in Rink Kelowna Academy, right? So they're
Yep.
part of the CSSHL, as it's called out here, right? The Canadian
Yep.
Sports School Hockey League, and yeah, I mean I mean, maybe we should start like digress. I mean, when I came up, there was AAA hockey. That's what there was. There was one
Okay.
league. It was AAA. That's where all the best players were.
Yep.
The geographic regions were set. I don't know if it was better or worse, but you knew where every good player was,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
there was one
Yep.
place to find them. Uh, as time went on, I think it started with Ryan Smith out here. Like he developed this HSL out of Alberta, so this Hockey Super League, he called it. And I'm not sure what his grievances were with Hockey Canada because he's considered Captain Canada, right? Which is kind of ironic in of itself. But
Okay. So
uh,
it is that Ryan Smith. I
yeah,
thought this.
that Ryan
Okay.
Smith
All right.
started but back in the day, and now it's like thriving. Like I don't know, 200-300 teams or whatever across youth hockey and in Alberta, and it's expanded into there's some teams in BC, and so this privatized model, of like we'll do it our way, kind of right, and not have any regulations or sanctions. Um, was a piece of it, right? So people started to think more outside the box, I think, about like, okay, what is available and what can we do and what do we want to have ownership of. And then with the Canadian Sports School League, I mean, where that comes into the evolution, I'm not 100% sure because I mean they've been around a while. It's just
Mhm.
been like a massive amount of expansion in the last little while. But once they came on board, like that was the one when they came on board in whatever capacity they did in their infancy, it attracted the best players. And why I think it attracted the best players was because of their access to ice. So now all of a sudden they opened up the ice model of when rinks were empty, right? Which is really, I
Yep.
think, the exact key of the whole thing is like they're not fighting for the previous prime hours, right? The after
True.
school to go to bedtime. So now they can actually offer practices at a discounted ice rate during the day. You
Yep.
can offer more ice time, and you can
Yep.
also you're not paying them as much for it. So now you combine with the school. So like my son, for instance, or both of them, I think it's the most, to be honest, in the entire CSSHL, but they get
Mhm.
2-hour practices every day.
It's a lot.
So he's on the ice 10 hours a week, right? If they're not
Yeah.
traveling for hockey. So, I mean, we could argue that aspect too. Is that actually too much or what? But
That's my question.
yeah. I
Not
mean,
not
is
not
it
that
too
we'll
much? Is
talk
it
about it
not? But
after, but
it's a
yeah.
lot, you know what I mean? And it's a lot, and I mean, you talk about reps and talk about all that stuff. If you're getting good ice time and you're using it to your advantage, I think, for me, I do think it is a great, it's a great selling feature. And then plus you play that, like they're in there from the start of school, which is September, whatever, 1, and they go to the middle of June. Like they cut back on the ice once the hockey season ends. But like now as a hockey parent, I don't have to worry about spring hockey, let's say for them, or spring development. Like that's handled inside the program. They're still going to school. They still do it during the day. They still get their workouts. They get their mobility sessions. They get their hockey classroom sessions, right? Like it's, it's a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
definitely a thing. So when the CSSHL came in, they started attracting the best players. So now there was like this fracture of like, okay, who's going where, and then it's like a keep up with the Joneses, right? Like, where do you go? And then you start seeing more kids get drafted from the CSSHL. So then there's more clamoring from parents to be like, well, this is where everyone's going. This is where everyone's watching. This is where the exposure is the highest. So now, yeah, like in BC, to bring this kind of full circle, I believe that there's too many academies in British Columbia for how many hockey players there are. So we're starting to get like it's a little bit watered down. Like some of the better programs are solid and traditionally are solid and will always
Yeah,
have good teams. Some of them aren't what I would call at the prep level. Like they're not quite there yet. They still participate in the same league. And then you have the AAA stream, which is the BC hockey stream, or the AJ Alberta hockey is like the AAA stream as well. The AAA stream in Alberta is much healthier because I believe there's only 3 or 4 academies in all of Alberta, whereas BC has 7, I think. So some of these remote areas, right? And we're talking U15, right? Is where
yeah,
this thing starts at. So
yeah,
I mean, if people don't want to bill it at 14, which I totally get, right? And
yeah,
so, you can stay home, but the idea here is, I guess I'm jumping all over the place. Like BC, I think that the AAA league in general isn't as good as the prep. I think that's pretty much non-debatable, right? Like
yep,
for the most part, the prep team, for like the good prep teams will beat the good AAA teams.
yep,
Um, and that's just because there's not enough players, right? So for me,
yep.
like that's where it gets a little bit sad, and it's also way too expensive. Like it's too expensive for AAA out here, and it's also too expensive for prep. And prep's more expensive in AAA, but again, I said like you get a longer season, you get more access to ice, you get these things that you don't get at AAA. But it's tough. I mean, I think that's the biggest issue hockey has to solve, and I don't know what it's like out there for you guys, but like it's too damn expensive. Like it's
Well,
too
that's
damn expensive.
it's just you opened up a lot of things that we could talk about here. To be honest with you, I really like this because it's number one, hockey is expensive. There's no question about it. Um, I can't understand why a stick has to cost $400 now, and skates are 1,000, and then you have to buy the blades to boot. And then just the cost of everything, and you have to have matching bags, jerseys. It comes out of the parents' pockets. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So what happened here in Ontario? This is what I've seen is in 2000. So when I started my business, and everything previous to that was your obviously your best players played AAA, and there was one team for the area, and more or less the best players played, or the players that can afford it that were the best players got to play. Then they would add, so a county has an extra team now, so now there's 2 AAA teams. So I was watching, and I was just kind of seeing, probably around when my kid was, let's say 2005 to 2009, there was I saw that when I was doing clinics, probably early 2000s, if I had a camp that said AAA, AA hockey player, it was very, very. There was several AA players that could maybe take spots in AAA, and then all of a sudden it was like almost impossible to find that. So I don't know what happened. If it, I can't even tell you what happened. But then I started seeing, okay, coming from Windsor, Ontario is not good enough. So I got to go play AAA in Toronto, and kids moving to different centers, and nothing was ever good enough. And I'm like,
Right.
this is getting ridiculous. I mean, Aaron Ekblad never left our area, and he was a first overall in every level he ever played, right? So it seems like if you're good enough, then you should be able to make it. But this is the thing, right? It drives that, like you said, keeping up with the Joneses. If he's doing that, I need to do that. So then the private schools started in Ontario. I would say probably 2010, real quiet. It's like there were some older ones like St. Andrews and Ridley, and then the Hill Academy started. Then all of a sudden they started popping up, and I started looking at it. And I'm going, like, especially in the last couple of years, I'm going, maybe this is the new way to go. Because as you said, like I think, like, not in Ontario yet, but over time, the private schools make sense, because now you have, like, if like we have one now, I sold my actual business, and I'm running what's called the BioSteel Academy, which is obviously BioSteel is a big piece of that. So now you're attracting good players in a good program, and it's like you said, you're getting ice, you're getting a good quality program if it's done properly. But the point is that if you don't have a good program, then you don't have a good team. So I think the good thing about the academies is that, as opposed to like, because if, like, in the Windsor area, if you live in Windsor and there's a Windsor team and there's a county team. So if you live on one side of the street, you're not allowed to play for the county or vice versa. So
Right.
if you're in Windsor and it's just the program's not very good, you're stuck. You might have a terrible coaching and practices at 10 o'clock at night, and and then it kind of forces you to say, well, I do want to look somewhere else for if coaching is the answer, then you're going to look somewhere else or just a good program. So
Yeah.
now if you're looking at these academies, it's like it actually starting to make a lot more sense that you
Yeah.
can choose a good program. So I think there's merit to it. Now, to me, the downfall, I don't even want to say downfall, it's just observations, is that it costs money to go to school, to one of these private schools. You might be billeting. So you want your kid to move away at 14 or 13 or 15 when he doesn't necessarily have to. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Stuff
Yeah,
like that.
no,
It's a lot of
it adds
questions.
up. It takes, I mean, yeah, it takes away the geographic boundary issue,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the
Yeah.
CSSHL, like they don't have to they abide by those rules. You can recruit from anywhere,
Yeah.
um, which I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? The the cost, yeah, I don't know who is in charge of like how that all works, but like it's, I mean, our for instance, I mean, firsthand with Rink, like we go to a public school, so like what our fees have nothing to do with school. Like we go to a school that's local here, they just become part of that catchment, and it's a regular public school. They're in with regular population of everybody else, right? So any fees that we incur has to do with just the hockey piece of that, you know.
Okay.
And yeah, even our AAA programs in British Columbia are really expensive. So I don't really know like what that is. It's tough because it's right from, like you said, to the equipment to the actual cost of the associations. But I mean, hockey in its essence is supposed to be, I don't know. It's just there's something blue collar about it that I love, you
Yeah.
know. And it's obviously it's losing that flavor and that element, you know, for good reasons. I mean, I think you mean if you're not a rich family, like it's really hard to do it, you know, and that's super unfortunate in my mind. So I don't
Yeah.
I wish I was part of some think tank and there'd be some way
Yeah.
to discuss that. But I mean,
Yeah.
back to your
Well,
point about players though, like I think yeah, like in the BC, this is what I would throw out if I was like chairman for a day. I think there's room for the prep scenario. Like out here, it's called prep. So like the top level would be prep, and there could be a super league. I think like 6 to 8 teams, like the CSSHL in the West, from like Winnipeg to BC. Let's say there's 8 teams that are allowed to have prep designated players. So now like they're recruiting from across Western Canada for these 8 spots at the 14, 15-year-old level, whatever age, you would have this, the best of the best, let's say, at that time. And then everyone else, I think, should be AAA.
yeah.
I just think that would be more competitive, and it would keep the actual BC hockey, Alberta hockey, Saskatchewan minor, like all those would be more competitive streams. I think there'd be more chance for development within those, and like and moving up. And then even the AA model, like I don't know, it's relevant. Like there is one kid here, like Lyndon Delman. I'll throw his name out there. So there's a local program, and I'll bring this up because we might as well just talk black and white. And I don't know what it's like
100%.
there because of my son. So Hudson started in this AA program. So it's not an easy program to make. It's a zone program, right? Like we're talking about multiple communities that are involved in the draw area. And as a first year going into U15, with a new contact and everything else, it's not an easy place to play.
Okay.
And he was able to make that team. 4 lines, right? Like struggling for ice time all year, but ended
Yeah.
up playing there. Positioned himself by the end of the year in kind of the top 5 in the league in points, and did good, and then was able to make, which was his dream, rink prep the next year, right, where he got drafted from. But like the jump, let's say if Hudson at AA, I think we paid about 4,000, maybe even less, to be honest, like in team fees travel. But like in that scenario, we had to go with Hudson to his road games or to his
Yeah.
tournaments, right? So you had to staple on some stuff there.
Yeah.
But that same option, if you would have made the AAA, let's say, that price tag now goes to like $20,000, and they take care of the travel. But the program itself, Andy, almost doesn't change at all. Like the amount of ice time, amount of practices a
Yeah.
week, amount of games that you play,
Yeah.
all of that stays almost exactly the same. Both have paid coaches, yet all of a sudden there's this $14,000 difference, which is mind blowing, right? And then the rink is, or like academy hockey is more expensive than that. So,
Yeah.
but the Lyndon Delma, why I brought his name up is because where they were located, he was a good enough player to play AAA. He was a good enough player to play probably prep. Well, not probably, he would have played prep somewhere. But they just kept him at home because he was 14 and there was no other option and they didn't want to do it and didn't want to pay the price. He dominated AA, like because he was a good player, but
Yeah.
he got drafted at AA in the 6th round. Like it does. I mean, they do find you. You mean to that point, right? He got drafted by Everett, 6th rounder. I mean, he's on that path. He wanted to be a guy. The family saved thousands of dollars in doing it. You know what I mean? Rolled the dice a little bit, but if you're good enough, you're good enough. So I mean, there is that message out there too, at least for the people out west.
Yeah, and I love that message because that's where I was going when you were talking. I was kind of going that thread, and I just wrote down as you said it. They're going to find you anyways.
Yeah.
And I think maybe just as a professional, because I tell my parents that, or a lot of people on the podcast. I don't read the comments, very very few. But if I do, and Eric, you'll throw something out, there's such a cynicism sometimes. Like if you say, uh, what's the boy's name again? Delani?
Oh, Delman.
Delman.
Yeah, Lyndon Delman.
I used to remember everyone's name. Now I can't even remember a name for 2 seconds. 55.
Yeah.
But okay, um, if you throw that story out to people without saying a name, if you're good enough, they'll find you. Then you get the cynicism saying, yeah, and they'll find you if your parents pay. They'll find you if you can't afford it, you'll never find. No, actually, they will find you if you are good enough. So that I think maybe the good thing that I'll always believe this. I'll always believe this. I have a hard time ever changing my mind. Is that if for parents that are that you feel like you have to do one path, I feel like like you don't have to. It's probably better. But if your son is good enough and you just can't afford it, or you think it's not a great decision or whatever, I really do believe that the kids that have the desire, have obviously the talent. There has to be a base level of talent and desire and work ethic and stuff. They will find you. And would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, and there is some. I mean, there's always variables, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to be in some level of a league where someone could watch, right?
Yes.
I mean, like, for sure. But I think, I mean, what wouldn't mind chatting about, and I don't know if it's the same in Ontario, but like, well, I'll use Hudson as the story. So I already brought him up as that first year he tried out for AA,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
He did try out for AAA too. Like I knew he wouldn't make it, or I thought he wouldn't make it,
Hmm.
but it was more he wanted to, and it was the experience for him. He did vastly better than I thought, and then he went to the AA stream. But if he didn't make AA, like he would have played local rep hockey in Vernon, like tier 2 rep hockey with whoever the coach ended up being and whoever the players ended up being. And for some reason, that freaks the shit out of people,
Yeah.
like out here. You know what I mean? And that's why, like, the varsity level of the prep thing is so well used, I think, because people like the idea of the security that, yes, I know my player is going to be here in this environment that I like, and if he's not going to be at AAA or AA or whatever, or I can go to maybe the JPHL now that's out here and I can secure my spot there before tryouts happen. And it's
Yeah.
all like, I think it seems to be like safety measures, like protectionism almost, right? Like to make sure that you have a spot, because everyone is so fearful of like actually playing local Vernon, or I mean, in our case, Vernon minor hockey, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I mean, again, like we were prepared to do that. And again, I'm a hockey guy, right? I was like, well, if he ends up there, like where you play is usually where you're supposed to play, right? So if
For
you're
the
supposed
most
to
part.
be, yeah, if you're supposed to be tier 2, then Hudson, go kick ass in tier 2 and become
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah.
But my middle son, who was a goalie, he played tier 2 last year. He didn't make the zone team that I was talking about. And guess what? I mean, he's the goalie for the prep team this year.
Yeah.
So like he kind of jumped almost 3 levels in 1 year playing rep in Vernon,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I just think people get so worried about like that 1 year of where it might be or where they might end up. And I always say, like, you're probably playing where you're supposed to play. And if that's where you're supposed to play, then learn what you need to from that level, dominate that
Yeah.
level, and then get out of that level.
Yeah. Now I know parents have to help guide your kids into making decisions, but just as we talk through that, would you agree, or no? I'm not going to make you answer it one way or another, but would you say that a lot of the times it's the parents that instead of guiding, they're worried and they're so concerned about the level. Like it's a parent thing less rather than a kid thing.
Yeah, it's a bulldozer thing. It's a manufacturer thing, right? Like you know, like
Yeah,
yeah, you're going to create the spot and whatever that is, motivation for people, right? Like
yeah,
security, like I said, that they know. Maybe it's like adversity of avoidance, right? Like I don't want my kid to go through not making it. You know, the fear of what might happen with that, where they would end up. Coaches, to your point, is a huge thing. I know, like at our minor hockey level, like we won't know who that coach is until like the players get filtered down to that level, right? And then somebody has to
hmm,
step up and coach. So, I mean, that's a legitimate concern that I'm not going to pretend isn't a legitimate concern, right?
yeah,
When you know where some of these established coaches may be coaching other programs. Um, and I mean, I'll be honest with that too. I mean, being a hockey guy, like I wasn't as worried because I know that I can facilitate, supplement whatever they need. You know, I mean,
yeah,
outside of that, not everybody has that ability, but I think that's probably the thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, right? Like the kids want to play with, like I said, Hudson for whatever reason. I think it was when Jerome McGinley came in. To be honest, that's when he kind of got more involved in like seeing the future of like what hockey could be.
yeah,
And Jerome came in from Boston and he had his kid playing and he's coaching at rank prep, and they had a good team that year and he started following along, and that was 2 years ahead of where he could be, right? So, you know,
yeah,
future thinking, and that was where he wanted to play. Like
yeah,
they had him hook, line, and sinker, right? For
yeah,
for whatever happened there, that was his goal. That was his goal set. That was he wanted to do. And I don't think Hudson's the only one. I mean, and I'm sure it works same for the same kids in Vancouver or in Calgary. They want to go play in Edge. They want to play where Landon Dupont played, right? They want to go play where
yeah.
these various programs, and it becomes a branding thing, I think, as much as anything else, and an ego
Yeah.
thing.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the PowerTech online membership program. If you've been listening to Andy and I wondering, hey, how are they able to get all this podcast content out there? Well, that's because of our members. For just $9.99 a month, you can get access to our online video library, including hundreds of videos of Coach Andy teaching, and have the option for consultation calls with Andy or myself to go over anything you need. We can cover training, nutrition, coaching, parenting, agents, the junior college hockey path, whatever's of interest to you. You'll also be able to participate in our popular Ask Me Anything episodes, have access to special discount codes, and be given priority for any PowerTech in-person camps or events. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, this is the best way to do it. Visit powertechhockey.ca/memberships or find the link in the description of this video to learn more.
One of the things I talk about with like we're going to move on to a different subject soon, but I'm enjoying this, by the way, is just kind of like this might even be part of your mindset stuff. So you're always teaching people, right? And it's people. A lot of I don't like to say people. I don't like to put everybody in the same bucket because that's not true. But if you talk to many parents or coaches, they feel like, or parents or players, what the message that gets sent is, I have to play for the best coach, because if I haven't played for the best coach, then I'll be a better hockey player. I have to play on the best team possible, because if I play on the best team possible, then will we get to championship games or whatever, and I'm going to get looked at more. They come out and look at better teams, and part of that stuff is true, but you tell me, because I know my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like yourself, growing up in youth hockey in Sudbury, Ontario, it's up north. Like it's not, it's kind of remote. Sudbury Wolves. I was drafted to my hometown, but when we went to tournaments, if I would win mostly the player of the game and the MVP of the tournament or the top four for pretty much every tournament. So it was like I was a good player, and our teams weren't good yet. How did I get drafted? So a lot of people now say, well, that was different back then. Okay, fine. But I could tell you this, when I went to the OHL as a 16-year-old, I was shocked, completely shocked that the coach wasn't very good. In fact, like I look now, because I was an assistant coach in the OHL, and I've been a skills coach with the Windsor Spitfires with Boogie and DJ Smith and Bobby Jones and all those guys, and Warren Reichelt. I was their skills coach and spent a lot of time in those rooms. And I remember being on the ice one day, and I went to Jonesy, so I was doing a skills session, and I there was so that day I was doing the skill session. Jonesy came out, DJ Smith came on, Boogie came on, Bobby Bugner, and Warren came on just for a skate. So I went to Jonesy. I said, Jonesy, check this out. I said, when you played in the Sioux your first year, how many coaches was there? He goes, one. I said, yeah. And I said, same with me. And I said, look at this, we got 6 of us out here, right?
Yeah.
And in the coaching, like what it was back then was, it was the only thing you ever heard. Be tougher, work harder. Be tougher, work harder. Like, it's actually not coaching.
Yeah.
So so you had to kind of figure it out yourself and ask questions, and maybe you'd get an answer, maybe you wouldn't.
Yeah.
And then I was also equally surprised, shocked, because I was pretty skilled, is, you'd be cutting for a puck and you're doing the right thing, and you got some big defenseman throwing it off the glass and you're chasing. Now you're F1 on a forecheck when you could be going on a 2-on-1. I'm like, the players aren't, like, they're obviously good at what they do. And partially was I didn't understand roles at 16. But so my point is the notion of, if you always play with really, really, really good players, there is a benefit to that, no question. But what happens if you get drafted first overall to the Regina Pats this year, right? They had first overall pick.
Everett did. They took DuPont.
Okay. Everett had first overall pick. So now you're the best player going to, is Everett the best team now? Probably not. They finished last. So having said that, there's a really good chance that you're playing with probably 10 plugs, not necessarily the highest skilled players, right?
Yep.
So now when you step into that environment, are you sitting there going like, no one can play? Or do you figure out how to play and make other people better? And it's the same thing with having great coaches when you're all the way up. Like, there certainly is a benefit, certainly is. But then, what if you get to the OHL or it could be the NHL, and you got a coach that your expectations are up here, and they're just down here, and they don't communicate. They're not what you thought it was going to be. It's like, now you have to adjust. So I think in many, many ways, I would encourage people to experience both.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe a good example is, like, I can use a first person example. Like, those are always the best and people appreciate them.
For sure.
Is Hudson, right? So Hudson, again, my oldest, in 2009, just got drafted in the 4th round, 89th overall to Kamloops, leaving U15 and now stepping into the U18 stream. And so he had an evaluation at rink, at his academy. Obviously, he could have went anywhere. We could have tried it anywhere, but we had that evaluation. And although, I was told by them, he was definitely in the conversation to well, I should backtrack. Hudson himself had an amazing second half of his season, right? Like, he essentially got himself drafted in the second half, had a really good second half, had a really good playoff, had a really good tournament, BC Cup, and kept moving up the draft board, so he finished strong. Had a hard time getting on the ice first half of the season, didn't play many special teams, like, that was his sort of adventure, and then ended up to be a pretty good player and ended up getting drafted. So that trend continued into his evaluations, and put himself in the conversation to be on the U18 prep team. Right? Like, they were like, yeah. And there was discussion with me, which they included, like, on where he should be or could be, right? The decision was made by rink, right? So the academy, that they thought U17 is the best place for him, right? So as the dad, right? And so here's a decision, right? He's good enough, in my mind, to be U18. I think that's really not negotiable. I think he's definitely good enough to play on that team. So the decision was, do you battle for that, or do you take what would be considered a demotion, like a little bit of an ego pill, when all the guys around him in that draft are all playing U18 prep, they've all been graduated on, blah, 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 or do you play U17? And so for us, again, who knows how this year's going to go? Like, this is in real time, and I'm being super transparent with my own family stuff, right? But like, the idea for Hudson is, the last 2 years, like even that North Zone year that we already talked about, and then last year as the U15 prep, he wasn't really a guy. Like, he hasn't been the guy on a team. He's always been fighting for minutes. He's always been figuring out his role. He's always been trying to get, recognized and, be somebody that doesn't have to panic or like be desperate every time he's out on the ice. Right. And to me, that's what showed up for him on a personal level at the Blazer camp, right? Like, he works his tail off, and he's a super smart player, and he's skilled, but like, he doesn't have that swagger yet in different situations, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, okay, take the ego pill. I think this is perfect for him. Hopefully he gets in a top 6 environment. Hopefully he has to play himself out of opportunities instead of into opportunities, because he hasn't really had that yet. And this could be an amazing year for him development wise. When it comes to puck confidence, being an offensive player, developing some swagger, whether that happens or not, I don't know. Right. But the other option would be him playing in a better league, continuing on that road of his development path, which is scrapping for every piece of food that he can get. Right. And I just thought he's had enough of that. So anyways, like, that was a personal decision for me. And like, to your point, like a lot of parents are always fighting to be in that top level. Like I thought this was actually the best choice for him, and let's go play there.
No, I love that. And you know, I'm looking at it in a sense for my own son, because he was. I mean, he plays in straight lines, right? He's got a lot of skill, and he's got a lot of like, he rip a puck, and he's a very intelligent player as well. But like for the first year, he's 15, and you know, his general manager George Burnett, you know, said one of the comments. I really like this statement. He goes, "Everyone's in a rush."
Yeah.
And what are you in a rush for, right? Like everyone's in a rush to be here, and I see that with parents. You know, like right away, it's like call the agent if you know he gets demoted to a different line. Call the agent if he didn't get a shift. Like you know, there's I don't know how many we've never done it because I you know, and this is part because we played. I said, Charlie, you have a problem, go to your coach and talk to him like a man, and he does. You have if you're not happy with your ice time, do something about it. Like you have to stick out in certain ways and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But so for the first year, it was like, Dad, I outplayed this guy. How come I'm not playing? I said, because you got to prove yourself. So he had to do that the first year. The second year, he maybe had. I hate to say this because it's going to be public, but he outplayed players, and it just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. So it was always like stay in those straight lines, and then even last year, he probably should have got more. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
This year, for sure, he's going to be in that position where he's going to be touching the puck a whole lot more. He's going to be in different situations, which is great because I think it's going to help his, you know, just to say, I still have this thing that I don't want him to lose is the thing that got him there, is that straight line stuff. So, but it's going to be interesting. And I think it's going to be good for him is like, you're going to be touching the puck a little bit more, different situations. And I think that's a really good decision on your part, because if you watch your son play, if you watch Hudson play and he handles the puck more, has a little bit more confidence, that doesn't go away real quick, right? Yeah. You know, you handle the puck, you maybe do some stuff. I think that's a really good decision for him, to be honest with you.
Well, and I mean, regardless of what he might be at junior or not junior, or what he might be a pro or not, like the idea is, even if you're a third line guy, you get a scoring chance. You mean you want to do something with it, or you get a 2-on-1, you need to be able to do something with it, or you know, you need to be a well-rounded type of player. And again, I mean, Hudson put up over a point a game last year, so I'm not trying to say that he doesn't know what he's doing with the puck, but you know, developing that swagger in real time, of course, is going to help you in whatever role that you're stepping into when you get to that next level, right? To feel comfortable, to feel like you've been there before, and yeah, so whatever. I mean, again, it is a long road, and that's one of the things that I've talked to, you know, my own boys about, and definitely the players that are in my, you know, my arsenal as far as from my mindset component, is that the younger that you can play the long game and learn what that is and what that even means, like that's when you develop this intrinsic motivation. That's when you aren't worried about like of the essence what happened yesterday, right? The mistakes don't mean as much, right? All these value points matter way more to you, but like, how much did I improve? What did I learn today? You know, how did I outwork somebody? And like, when you start thinking in that type of a timeline, like, again, him playing U17 this year, if that makes him be 1 year farther away from the WHL, but yet when he arrives at the WHL, he's going to be ready. That's what matters to me. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like that's what matters.
100%. Yeah. So I wanted to get to mindset, and you already said it. So here we go. What in your mindset? We're going to call it training or talk. Like how would you define it, and tell me, like in the basics, the essence of what is it? Because I live and die for this stuff. I love it.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you asking. And what maybe this is a good marketing lesson for me, because I haven't really figured out. I mean, I call it high performance mindset training, and a lot of time people have, like, they come to that party or they come to that conversation with some preconceived idea of what it is, you know, that it is. People tend to automatically think about visualization a lot, or meditation, or mindfulness, or some of these things. And to be honest, like, I talk a little bit about visualization, because I do think it's an important piece of preparation. But it's not something, like, I don't dive deep into that. There's people that do that. You know what I mean? That's all they specialize on. Like, I think more holistically when it comes to mindset. So when I use that word, yes, we do talk about confidence, right? A lot. That's something that players always come with. How do we develop it? How do we keep it, right? So I believe that's a piece of mindset that's under the mindset umbrella. But there's 5 components of confidence that I think all encompass, you know, mindset, which is your belief in the process, right? Your environment that you create, your success factors, your competence on the ice. Like there's these different attributes, and one of the pillars is also mindset, right? Like, how do you think about your game? How do you think about yourself? What's your self-talk like? What do you believe? What is your belief system? What do you think about mistakes? Like all these things I think are so integral to overall performance, that I think for the vast majority of people who haven't been involved in high level sports, or let's even say high level business, um, it's kind of a foreign language, So it's so integral that I find it really rewarding, Andy, because there's so much emphasis right now on that skill portion of the game, right? Like the training and the nutrition and all those things that are very, very important for high performance. But the most important piece is the one right between your ears, right? And nobody's talking about that, because I don't care how many stick handles you can do or how many times you can bench press or squat or whatever. But if you have a fear of making a mistake, or if you don't have the confidence to attack a challenge, or if you don't have a good programmed intrinsic belief system about what your development looks like when no one's telling you to do it, you're missing the point and you're not going to make it. I guarantee you. Right. So, anyway, so that's what I talk. That's what I teach. Each individual is super different as far as like what they would need. The program that I created is an online program that anyone can take. It's a 4-week program.
It's online. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I find that to be actually, I kind of just lucked into that, to be honest. I just thought that there was somebody that around me at the time. Well, you know what? It was my wife. My wife's a professional dancer, and she was getting into some stuff, and she created this program. And I'm like, you know what? That's the perfect delivery mechanism. Video based, right? Like nobody wants to read anymore in the younger age group, right? Yeah. So video based, accessible from anywhere. It's on their time and on their schedule. I can control when the content's released and everything else. But anyways, I do want to touch on what you talked about there as far as like having to raise your hand and saying there's something wrong, because that was intrinsically like how it was when I think I went through it, which I was so avoidant of the process. But I believe that character, how to be a good teammate, attitude, accountability, like those are things that I would place under mindset, because I believe that they're all a choice. Like, I believe that we're in control of those things, and how we perceive all those things that I just said matters. And it matters way more than players give credit to, especially the interaction, the human element of like the interpersonal things that happen in a hockey locker room or with management or whatever, right? Like we need to be really robust humans, and if we are really robust humans, like it allows our skill level to take over, allows our skill level to flourish, it allows whatever potentials within us to have this opportunity, and plus we create fans around us, like whether it be teammates or otherwise, which we all know, like someone needs to call your name and want your name to be called, and it's not just your stat line that does that in a lot of cases. So anyways, I get kind of excited about that, because I do have a little personal philosophy that I think that hockey players should be like the best people in the world. Like if you meet a hockey player that played at any type of level at all, like that goes with a prerequisite of being like this guy or girl's like a solid human. Like I want them to be part of my team. I want them, they're good in the community. They're good fathers. They're good mothers. And I think our sport's amazing to be able to do that. And yeah, it definitely helps in their career. So as far as what you said there, I mean, I don't know if that does any better job of saying what I do. I still think it feels like it's too big of a brush, but
yeah, well, you're trying to say everything, and there's so much to say. And it's but maybe I'll help you with this. I think I always say this to people when we talk about your mindset is, we all heard the term that mental toughness, or your mental whatever, what part of the hockey is mental, and people come up with various numbers, right? Could be, you hear, it's 99% mental. Okay, maybe it's only 20%. Like, who knows? But you and I can agree that it's something. And the question is like, even if it is only 10%, are you putting 10% of your training into the brain?
Right.
And I would say guaranteed no.
Yeah.
Most, like, I mean, and I guess how do you do it anyways? Yeah. So, and the tough part with the mental toughness part, or the mindset part, is you just don't get to see it right away, or you don't even feel it right away. If we do 5 sets of squats, we'll get up, for the first time. The next day you walk and you couldn't pull a pin out of your ass with a tow truck, right? It's you feel it, right?
Yeah.
So whereas if you read a book, or if you read something, if you do a simple exercise, okay, what was that? It sounds good, I guess. It takes time, and I think a lot of times that's an issue. It takes time, and you can easily forget about it.
Yeah.
So I think what I do, and I don't know, maybe this will gear you somewhere, is like when I talk to players, because I like to give players things where they can actually see it and maybe use it right away, and combine it with mom and dad or even coach. So what I do this. I just did one last week with the first group of my leadership group. So what I always do is I ask the kids where do they want to be, like what's the end goal of this, and you can never laugh, because the worst player could end up being, well, actually, quick story. Matt Martin plays for the Islanders. He's trained with us, and he was the worst player ever. There was not one person ever played Double A or A, never played Triple A hockey ever. We played Junior C, then he was Junior B, and called up with the Sarnia Sting for whatever reason. He got a tryout. Yeah. Then the year he played with Sarnia, he was on Steve Stamkos' line. Anyways, this guy leads the league in hits year after year, and he's on his, I think, 16th year in the NHL. So you can't tell anybody that they can't.
Yeah, exactly.
You just can't. Nope. So, anyways, what I do with the kids is where do you want to be, and then we have to kind of work backwards, and then what I find is if I can give them something that they can actually measure. So I was just saying to the kids last week, like when you come out after a game, one of the worst things that parents do is they give their opinion on the game. And like with my son, when we would come out, the only thing I asked him, I said, "Did you have fun today?" And he'd go, "Oh yeah, it was great." Because if he had a great game, it was the best. And if he didn't, and he knew it, he would say something, "Yeah, it was fun, but," or "I wasn't that good." And I would just leave it at that. The only thing I would ever maybe not even give it to him, just point out to him, is that I don't know if your effort was the best tonight. That's got to change, or something along those lines. But most parents don't have the ability to understand, like, your first year in junior, I don't know if you went from playing in midget hockey, getting all the ice, to first year in junior on the fourth line going, what's going on here? So it's a mindset right there. It's like, am I not good anymore? So there's something right there. Sure. And you question yourself, and that's your confidence thing. It goes, okay, I'm losing it. You don't have to let that happen. Yeah. But anyways, you have all these questions. So you come out after a game, and you think you played the best game of your life. And Grammy or mom or dad comes out to you after you thought you played the best game, and they grab you, and you walk out, and your dad gives you the furry eyeball and goes, "You're garbage today." Well, based on what? Like, based on what is that? Is it effort? Is it I didn't score? Is it what is the like, where'd you get that from? Or vice versa. You come out of the game and you just sucked. You were not good. You were dog shit. And you come out and Grammy grabs you by the cheeks and says you're the cutest little boy and you were such a good hockey player out there, and you're like, but I sucked. So what I try to tell the kids is to have 4 or 5 things that they can evaluate themselves. So like actual physical things, like, is it a forecheck? Not goal score, not outcomes. Like is it back checking? Is it forechecking? You make a nice pass, you get a shot, you block, things that you can control. And then at the end of every shift, you can kind of say, okay, I got 1 out of 5, because you can't score from your own end, so that doesn't count. Like, you got to have 3 zones. So at the end of the day, you can have your own evaluation and say, you know what, every shift I did 1 or 2 of these things, so it wasn't that bad, right? And then if mom and dad could kind of go on that same page, then you can have equal ground, right? So that's just something that I work with kids.
Yeah, no, good for you. I mean,
do you have anything like that, like that where they can kind of measure themselves?
Yeah, I mean, definitely everything that I talk about is process oriented for sure. I mean, the biggest thing is people chasing a stat line in whatever context, right? And that's not a very good indicator. It can be, but it's not a great indicator of how you played. So And again, and that's one of the pillars of the confidence thing that I was talking about. Like results is one, right? Like if you get results in something, and that means for a lot of players, you're a goal scorer and you leave a game with a hat trick, you
Yep.
are going to feel good about yourself in a way that I just performed. I got 3 goals. I feel confident, right? Like that goes without saying. But
Yep.
as you know, like what happens if you don't score for 4 games? Does that mean you shouldn't be confident anymore?
That's
No,
right.
right? Like you can still be confident just because you haven't had the results. Or what if on the vice versa, you're going into a new league that you've never scored a goal in your life?
Yep.
Does that mean you can't be confident going into that league? I mean,
No.
no. So we need to be able to, construct other vehicles to allow us to be able to have these levels of confidence. And and one of the things you're saying there, as far as like process related focus points, is a huge one, right? Like that match the type of role that the player excels at. Like what do you do well? I mean, I even talk about, to me, that's mindset. Like we talk about like player identity a ton
Yep. Yep.
with the players that I work with. And not with the idea that there's a ceiling on you and you can't be something else, but you are on that team for a reason, period.
Yep.
Right? Like you brought something to the table that the coach saw that you're really good at. That means you should do that as much as you can. Right? Now you can
100%.
expand from that, but like that's one of your criteria. I mean, especially if you're a junior age player, right? Like what do you do? And you need to do that. Do it better than anyone else.
Yep.
And then you grow these other aspects off of that. I think like that's, for those listening right now, like that is such a big one, is to understand your value and to own your value, like, and to get really crystal clear on that value. Because when we're trying to do things either that we're not, or that somebody doesn't want us to do, or because dad wants us to do it and we're trying to do something contrary to that, I mean, that's confusing, and confusion leads to hesitation, leads to passiveness, leads to lack of confidence, lack of empowerment. Like that's not a good hockey player in front of you right there.
No, and I hope for all the parents listening, all of them, like every single parent, and including me, is I hope they dive into, like, at least take a look at your program. Like at least go into the website. Like can you just put the link or whatever on it, and I'll make sure it goes in the notes,
Sure.
because so what would be the link or
It's
the
just, I mean, you go to
website?
upmyhockey.com. So
Okay.
upmyhockey.com. I mean, it'd be under mindset, I think. I'm not even that familiar
Yeah,
with my own
obviously. Okay.
website. I think
So
it's
it's
under
in one of the
mindset and there's
links.
a program there. But yeah,
Okay.
so you know, if you allow me to talk about it a little bit, I mean, there's
100%.
okay, there's 2 ways like people can take it. So I have a contingent of players that will join like that 4-week program from all over North America, right? And it's called My Guided Mission. So they'll take the
Yep.
program on their own in the comfort of their own homes. They'll watch the 20 minutes of video a day. They'll do the assignments. They'll apply the stuff throughout the day, and then at the end of that week, we'll get on a coaching call. So I'll be dealing with Jimmy, who's a WHL player, and Bobby, who's a U13 player. Right, we're all in the same classroom, and we dive into the material a little bit deeper, and we make sure that everyone's getting engaged and understands it's digested it and used it. So like that's like the one way to take it. The way that I think is like the most powerful way to take it. I shouldn't say the most powerful, but from a hockey perspective, and me being a hockey coach, is when a team does it together. So the team
I
can
like
do
that.
this
Yeah.
thing together. All the guys get it. It changes the culture. It changes the approach. It changes the perspective. They now have a language that they can talk to and refer to. The
Yeah.
parents are on board. That the coaches have access to it, and that's a lot of fun for me to get involved in it that way. So there's 2 ways to do it: the individual way or the team way. And there's, yeah, I mean, if I may, like you talked about the idea that it takes a long time. Like I've actually seen so many scenarios where like a player just needs to be unlocked. And like week 1 of my program is called mental agility. Like my term that I frame for, we talk about closing the gap, hockey term for defense and playing good defense. But I use that when it comes to the mental aspect, the emotional aspect. How quickly can you close the gap between something that didn't go your way to something that you want it to, right? How do you get back to that emotional frequency? And we also talk about the emotional management. And this is like big language for the young kids that are listening. Like all it is essentially, how do you play your best hockey? Like, how do you feel when you play your best hockey? Like to actually ask that question, get them to understand that there's 2 ways to do that. There's either a primal set of emotions, which is like fear, anxiousness, scarcity, sadness, whatever. I mean, you can get on that level, or there's like joy, excitement, enthusiasm, confidence, and everyone will be, when they play their best hockey, in some type of a powerful emotional state, not a primal emotional state. So like for kids listening, or I mean, kids, I say, but like this goes to pros too that I've worked with, right? Like if you enter a game in a primal state, right? You're tight, you're scared, you're anxious. You are not going to play your best. Simple, simple math, right? So how do we create that state before the game even starts? And so from like week one, when we start talking about mental agility and we started talking about like the emotional way to be your best hockey player, like that in itself can be like, I've had parents call me and be like, you know what? Like not only did Johnny play amazing, but I had parents come up throughout the weekend and say, what did we do to him? Like for other people to notice, right? And this is a span of like 7 days of doing 20-minute videos that this kid just shows up differently and is now playing to his skill set potential. So I've had a lot of fun with that stuff, right? So it can be a long process, but it can also be like a light switch for some guys. And it's like the exact thing they needed, just a perspective change.
Yeah, I agree. I don't doubt that for 1 second. I mean, I could say the same thing. Like if you can give a kid just like that one, it might be like a lot of kids don't know their identity. So they understand their identity and they do those 4 or 5 things that they wrote down and they focus on that, and all of a sudden they just have a better game.
Yeah.
It's like that wasn't rocket science.
Right.
So I do believe that 100%, that once you start tapping into not the goofy stuff, you know what I mean? It's like this is real stuff.
Yeah.
And to boot, we're learning this, like not we are, like the people that would be listening to this are learning from people that you didn't learn this in a lab. You learn this through playing as well.
Yeah.
So you know, I always tell that to my wife. You know, like sometimes she goes, he looks a little tired today. I said, yeah, okay. So listen, honey, he just went out there and he hammered 3 people and went to the net and back checked once. I said, I'm tired watching. So you don't know what that's like, but like you do. So you understand the actual physical part of playing hockey, the mental side. Like I remember, like just speaking of the mental side, you probably agree with this. I don't know. It's so funny when I run into guys that I played with that were tough, like Dennis Vial, right? Tough.
Yeah.
Paul Laus. I think you might have played with Paul.
Yeah, I played with Laus.
Tough. So all these guys, I was just under 5'10", skilled. Fight when I had to. Like I did I did not a tough guy, but I did what I had to do when I had to do it. Stick up for myself, stick up for teammates. But I remember my first year of junior hockey, being 5'9.5" in 1985 at 16 years old. You had your work cut out for you. And I remember my first game going down. We're playing Windsor Spitfires at home, and I was coming down the wing, and I had to make a decision. I remember like it goes slow motion. I could picture it. I'm coming down, and Glenn Featherstone was the D that I was coming down on the wall. And slow motion, I said, you have a choice to make, bud. You have a choice, because fear is real. Fear is real. You're going to go chip it in and take this hit, or you're not. And I chose to do the right thing, and I went through, and he got a piece of me, but not enough, and I got squeezed through, and I was able to get on a puck. Okay? And I had to do that a couple times. And it took me probably a month before I said, okay, I'm like I can do this. I was 16. And then the mindset of like, you know, being small, like it was so much fighting and brawls. I mean, you know, and so you're sitting there every game going, okay, who are we playing? You're going down the list, and you're like, it was in my head at 16 years old. And then at the end of it, you know, Mark LaForge was another one. He goes, I'm scared every day. I didn't sleep. I'm like, but you guys were the tough guys, but everybody had this facade of I am tough and it didn't bother me, but everybody had the same thing going through their head. Some guys handled it differently. Yeah. Some guys got through it quick, and some guys just couldn't play at all. Yeah. So it's like, I think it's critical for every player, whether it's a physical intimidation or whatever it is, to get at your best. And someone that like yourself, or someone like myself, when a kid plays, they could be honest with me. I could say, I've been there and I've done that. So I think it's very valuable. And then I think it's very valuable for parents to actually look at it too, to understand that it's not just as simple as you think.
Yeah. Well, 100%. And yeah, it's not simple at all. And when I was playing, or when we were playing, I mean, sports psychology was just coming in. Like I know the Toronto Maple Leafs had a sports psychologist. There was one with Florida. At the time, they weren't players, right? So they were clinicians, right? And
they look like accountants.
Yeah, and again, and nothing against them, like very good at their job, but like I believe that the messenger matters, right? So for some players that was the perfect person for them, and for others it wasn't, and someone like me is the perfect messenger for some players, right? Like they want somebody that's been in the trenches. They want somebody that's been where they want to go, that has the first person experience, that can speak the game of hockey, the language, like is still involved in it, still trying to get better every day, right? Like the mindset of that, I think, matters. And so for some players, I think, I am the right guy. I'm not going to say I am the right guy for everybody, but I think that there is a broader audience, I think, for someone that is passionate about it, who understands the value of it, in a first person scenario. And to me, like what I say to my players too, like back in our day, like there was such an armor, to your point, of like what a hockey player was. It still exists, but I do think that that's changed. I think there's a little more chink in that armor, but like, any type of vulnerability was, one, unacceptable, and two, you would definitely not be raising your hand to volunteer that there was some type of problem or issue, right? At least that's the way I felt. I mean, I wasn't going to make a phone call and be like, "Hey, I'm having a hard time with this adjustment." Like I don't know if the GM's going to hear that or the coach is going to hear that. Like that's the last thing I'm going to do. So I do believe that's changed. I do believe that's shifted, but I still think there's a stigma there around it. I mean, it's nice that it is changing, but I think the stigma still exists. And so what I say to players, like, there are some players that come to me that they know that they are, timid, or they know that they're scared of making mistakes. They know that they're scared of what, players are going to think. Like, so there are players that come to me like, "Hey, I have this problem that I would like to have help with," which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That's amazing. You can raise your hand and do that. I'm a third party. I'm not involved with your team. I have no influence on your ice time. Like, I'm just here to help you, period. I like that aspect of it. And I think they feel comfortable with me in doing that. But the thing that I like to say is like, if you want to be your best, shouldn't you be looking at that, to your point from earlier, right? Like, isn't this something that you should be invested in? So there might be nothing wrong. And actually, for the players out there that you said you talked to some of the parents of, like, get ready, like if there's no storm right now, if there hasn't been a storm, there will be a storm. And you 100%. Want to be as prepared as possible for that storm. 100%. And you want to be extracting every ounce of your potential as you can before that storm happens. And why not, right? Invest in it. So like, that's my thing, is like, do you want to be your best hockey player? Like, do you want to be the best you can be? And generally the response is yes. Well, so what are we doing to do that? You don't have to have any issue right now, but if you're not really exploring that extra whatever percent in you that you haven't explored, you're not doing your best job at being your best. So I like having it framed that way, right? More of an excellence kind of scenario as like a fixing scenario, right?
Yeah. No, it only makes sense. Like, but I'm just encouraging one more time, upmyhockey.com and look at this for any parent. We have a lot of listeners, Jason, and I'm really encouraging people just to at least do yourself a favor. Just check out the link.
I appreciate. I really appreciate you. You talking. I love helping kids. I mean, if I can help anybody, like that's amazing. I do on the website. There's in the top right. There's something called the mindset quiz. It's a great starting point for any athlete, whatever their age is. So it's like 20 questions, essentially. They'll get a letter grade for where their mindset's currently at. It kind of opens the door to maybe what mindset would look like as far as working with me. And then, the discussion can continue, or it can just be a curiosity aspect to see, where they would fall with a mindset letter grade. So if they want to take that quiz to get started, that'd be a great place to start.
I even just like with kids sometimes, or parents, I'll just recommend a simple book, and just to get them thinking a little bit. And I know it's hard because you got all these other things in your day, and that seems like it's a lot of effort, but it's so worth it's the best bang for your buck. So that's awesome, man. So just the last thing, I know you probably have to go, and I know I'm not the smartest guy in the world to keep talking. No, I'm just kidding. I just want you to go ahead and just talk about your UP Up My Hockey 68. What do you got going on there? It's something that we're going to talk about later, you and I.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was it's a product of my insanity a little bit, and some of the business, I guess, aspect coming out of me. But like, so it was Hudson, again, he's been a part of a lot of these scenarios. He was a part of the BC hockey program of excellence. So as a minor bantam, it's the first year that they do this program, right? So they have a regional camp that anyone can sign up for. They get selected from that regional camp, if they're good and evaluated in a whatever tier they're in, to go to this provincial camp. So that's their first experience with it. So Hudson made that provincial camp. It was a top 160 player thing, right? 8 teams at the provincial camp.
Yep.
And as I mean, I'm not here to bash BC Hockey, because they did a ton of stuff for me, and they do a lot of stuff really well, right? But at that level and at that age group, like, we left there, I was like, there was too many players, in my opinion, right? It was a little bit watered down. There was 4 lines on every team. They had runtime games, so you're talking like 3 shifts a period in an environment like that. You're spending a lot of money to go there. There was just some kind of holes in it that I was like, geez, there should be one more step, is kind of what I thought at the time. Like, this 160 is okay, this is fine, but there should be something that's a little more robust, a little bit more hockey centric, maybe some more top player oriented. And then I also was like the Up My Hockey twist. Like, I'm like, this should be also really developmental and educational, I think, not just a competition kind of per se. And so that's where that idea came. So we left that event, and I'm thinking, geez, maybe I could do this. Like, maybe this could work, and this what I would do. And I ended up calling the city of Vernon. I didn't think there'd be any ice, and that would have been where the whole thing stopped. But all of a sudden there was ice. Like, the facility was available. I could do what I wanted to do. It was 32 days, like, from when I made that phone call to when, like, the event could be.
Wow.
And I managed to find 3 teams of, like, really good players. Like, 11 players got drafted from my first inaugural one to the WHL, right? Like, all across the province, players came.
Perfect.
Like, from as far north as like 14 hours away. And yeah, pulled it off in 30 days. Like, this kind of from ideation to execution. And just from the report from everybody, I mean, I had workshops involved, like parent and player workshops, right? There was, a banquet for them. Obviously the competition was great. I mean, all the bells and whistles, treated them like pros in the dressing room, and whatever, a lot of detailed stuff that I tried to take care of, and so the response was amazing, right? So then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, like, this, the proof of concept works, right? And then so last year was my second year doing it. And I opened it up to another age division, and I did another weekend. And yeah, I mean, like, I say this humbly and gratefully, but, like, the experience for everybody, like, it blew it out of the park again. Like, everybody absolutely loved it. And so, yeah, it's an invitational event. Like, I mean, I go out and scout. I mean, either me personally or through my network. We identify who the top players are in that age group, and we send invites out around Christmas to this 4-day hockey experience, really, right? Where they're playing against each other, but they're also, they're in the workshops. They're learning about whatever it is that we decide that they should be learning about. And yeah, they're meeting friends from all over the country or from the province, and it's just it's something that I'm quite proud of. And now we're expanding. So I mean, that's what I'm talking. We're
awesome.
going to Saskatchewan. I'm having talks with somebody from Manitoba. Like, I want to get definitely something in Alberta, and you and I are maybe going to talk about what that could look like in Ontario. But it's
you know what I did, not to cut you off, but I'm cutting you off.
Yeah, no worries.
I was telling my wife this. It was interesting. So you said it earlier too. It's like, you can learn so much from hockey if you do this thing right. You don't have to play in the NHL.
Yeah.
Do this thing right, you're going to learn so much. So my brain typically goes, like, if you talk to me about spring hockey, I go negative, typically. You talk to me about an invitational thing, typically I go, this stuff. But if it's done right, it's all good. But the thing is, for that, like, that might be the first for your top 60 or 68, might be the first time that these kids have ever gone from a different place and went to a room where they didn't know anybody. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
I was telling my wife that, like, I'm very proud. We just did this, right? And people don't really think what your kids are doing sometimes, but because and I think maybe for me, it's more, when I talk to my wife about it, it's deeper for me, because I had to be that guy, right? You're going into a room full of strangers, you get naked, someone says, hi, you're fat, you're skinny, all these things, right? It's the dressing room. It's a tough place, and you're getting judged all the time. So when Charlie was going to Detroit this year for his development camp, obviously he wasn't flying from Windsor to Detroit. We could drive there in 20 minutes. So he doesn't have his own car yet, so we drove him. So 20 minutes later, we drop him off in downtown Detroit at this beautiful hotel, and you can see a couple other kids coming in. Their flights came in, and there's a 27-year-old guy there. There's they're pros, like some pros and some, but anyways,
Yeah.
from all over the world. I told my wife when we're driving back, I said, what people don't understand about this game, what makes it so great, is that you wonder why you and I could never meet, and we're gonna fight to get off the computer right now because we're talking because we're like-minded. But I know that you did the same as me, that you took your scared ass at 16 and moved away from home and had to fit in and meet. And if you didn't fit in, then it doesn't work. Like, you have to go across a room to someone that might be maybe that you've looked up to for 5 years or something, and shake their hand and say, "Hey, how you doing?" and have a conversation. And you meet people from all around the world, and it's amazing to me. Not amazing to me, but like I'm so proud of nothing else. I know my son will be able to leave this hockey world, and if he has to get a job somewhere, he'll know how to do it.
Yeah.
He'll know how to walk in a room and make a friend, or at least talk the talk. And so, like, as much as like I'm against a lot of things that we do for what various reasons in hockey, there's still, you can find benefits. And like when you say with your UPM 60 or 68,
UMH 68.
UMH 60, I'm not even close anymore.
That's okay.
That's an experience there. And then if you get around maybe a coach that teaches you something else, it's like you come away from something like that with like that's a lot of knowledge, man. That's a lot.
Well, no, I mean, yeah. And that's, again, it's very, very on point, which is why I have no problem talking about it and promoting it with what I believe my hockey is, right? That holistic approach to player development, right? Yeah. Yes, hockey is involved because it has to be, right? And there's nothing wrong with having hockey involved and having the competition involved, because the best on best experience is an amazing experience unto itself, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of value from that, especially when you're in a room, to your point, with, players that you don't know from all over the place, right? Exposure for the players from the north, to experience what it's like playing against the players from the coast and from the interior and from the island. So that aspect is super cool. And then you bring into all those little interpersonal relationships, all those little touch points with the coaches that I bring in, that are established coaches that are there for one reason only: to educate the players on how to be better players, right? Like, that's what they're there for 4 days. Like, that's what I bring in players that's all they're there to do, right? Is to make that experience great and to help them become a better player. So like, when you're in that environment and then you're talking to parents and players at the same time in meeting rooms about subjects that matter, that again give this holistic approach, I don't know. I feel really good about when they leave, what they're leaving with. I mean, it's packed full for the 4 days. There's a lot of, there's time left for them to get to know each other, with the banquets that we have and everything else. And there's time between games. It's not the schedule that you're waking up at 7 in the morning and going to bed at 10 at night, after a game. Like, there's room to socialize and to meet people. And yeah, I mean, and it's really captures what I believe everything is great about our game. And that is one of the things, is the people aspect. That is one of the best pieces of playing a team game, especially hockey, is that's what I remember most, is like, picking up the phone and having a conversation with the guy that I played with 25 years ago and haven't seen since. And it's like, no problem having a conversation, right? Like, and that guy would probably go to bat for me if I showed up in town and needed a job or needed something or whatever, right? Like, that's the network that you're building,
Yeah, that's the one thing we'll wrap it up here in a second. But that's the one thing that my wife just sometimes goes, and Charlie, this is a really cool thing, man. It's amazing because your kids are watching you even though you don't know it. And he's the first time one of his teammates got traded his first year, is like a really good friend too. He was, obviously like, my buddy's gone, like, cause you never expect that, right? He goes, I might never see him again, Dad. And I said, who are my friends, Charlie? And he goes, yeah, you're right. Cause like, I've got so many guys that I played with that call video. They know, they've come down to visit. They know my son. And I don't know if you remember Paul DiPietro. He played in Montreal a little bit.
Yep.
He's my best. I'm going to say he's my best friend. One of my best friends. We FaceTime at least once a week. And my son always remembers, oh yeah, there's Paulie, and then there's a Greek. Oh, and there's Dino. And he remembered Jonesy and all this. He goes, I guess you'll be right. I said, yeah, they're going to be there. They're lifers.
Yeah.
They're lifers, and it's the best thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, we can keep going, brother.
No, I know we could. Yeah, we could. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, but listen, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. We didn't really get to talk about how great of a hockey player you are, and I know you probably don't even want to talk about it. But I really do thank you for taking the time to come out, and I thank you that you've watched some of our clips and you are aware of what we do. And I'm very sincere. I'm always sincere. If there's anything I can do for you, I want you to reach out. I'd be happy to help you in any way. And
awesome, man.
Anyways, that's all I got.
Yeah, no, it's great. I appreciate you reaching out and appreciate the opportunity to have a hockey chat and reach hopefully a new audience. My old Maple Leaf stomping ground audience. So, that's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, thank you, Jason.